Okay, Courtney, come on up. Courtney Dunn, she volunteered at the Memphis Zoo, and that's how we kind of we really got to kind of know each other through Facebook. I kept monitoring her posts and all. And I don't know how, there must be 36 hours in her day, because I don't know how she does everything she does. I just can't fathom how she manages it all. And I'm going to let her tell you what all she's involved in. I know she's been to Africa and worked with penguins, and she worked with tigers, and she teaches, and I'm going to let her tell you everything she does. But she really is amazing, and I hope you will enjoy the program.
Hey. Thank you, Cheryl. And so, like she said, my name is Courtney Dunn. I come from the large town of Pleasant Plains, Arkansas, population 300. So Memphis is a big change for me. I grew up on a cattle farm, where, of course, that's kind of where my animal interests lie. I didn't get my first cat, so all of this is about cats, so I have to bring that up. Didn't get my first cat until I was in 3rd grade, so maybe I just always had an obsession with them because it was denied to me for so long, I don't know. But living on the farm really introduced me to a different world. So I grew up in a bigger city of 7,000, Newport, Arkansas. I started getting involved with the vet work that we did at our farm. Really enjoyed it, volunteered with the vet. I got paid a few times, so that's great. And then I started my bachelor's degree at the University of Central Arkansas. What I wanted to do at the beginning of all of this was to go to vet school, become a wildlife veterinarian, so work in a zoo setting somehow. So of course, naturally, I started seeking out zoo internships. The only one close to us is the Little Rock Zoo. Applied, I didn't have any real experience.
Jessica, excuse me, Cheryl.
Okay.
If you will please come up and introduce our guest speaker.
Okay, Courtney, come on up. Courtney Dunn, she volunteered at the Memphis Zoo, and that's how we kind of we really got to kind of know each other through Facebook. I kept monitoring her posts and all. And I don't know how, there must be 36 hours in her day, because I don't know how she does everything she does. I just can't fathom how she manages it all. And I'm going to let her tell you what all she's involved in. I know she's been to Africa and worked with penguins, and she worked with tigers, and she teaches, and I'm going to let her tell you everything she does. But she really is amazing, and I hope you will enjoy the program.
Hey. Thank you, Cheryl. And so, like she said, my name is Courtney Dunn. I come from the large town of Pleasant Plains, Arkansas, population 300. So Memphis is a big change for me. I grew up on a cattle farm, where, of course, that's kind of where my animal interests lie. I didn't get my first cat, so all of this is about cats, so I have to bring that up. Didn't get my first cat until I was in 3rd grade, so maybe I just always had an obsession with them because it was denied to me for so long, I don't know. But living on the farm really introduced me to a different world. So I grew up in a bigger city of 7,000, Newport, Arkansas. I started getting involved with the vet work that we did at our farm. Really enjoyed it, volunteered with the vet. I got paid a few times, so that's great. And then I started my bachelor's degree at the University of Central Arkansas. What I wanted to do at the beginning of all of this was to go to vet school, become a wildlife veterinarian, so work in a zoo setting somehow. So of course, naturally, I started seeking out zoo internships. The only one close to us is the Little Rock Zoo. Applied, I didn't have any real experience outside of my first year of college, so didn't get it. My mom, she'd be crying right now. She cries every time I tell this part of the story. She called the Memphis Zoo. It was past the internship deadline, and she just said, Courtney just really needs to get started, just beg. I'm not sure who the internship coordinator was at the time, because I think she's now gone, but she basically said, I'll give her an interview and we'll see how it goes. Rest is history from there. So I got in, I started working with Aaron Brown, Carol Hesh, all them over with penguins. And so I started driving here 2.5 hours one way each Saturday just to volunteer. I got hooked with it. That experience sent me to South Africa to work with African penguins in the wild. I have a scar from one of them now, so a lasting experience. And throughout all of this, I ended up interning with the elephants here at the Memphis Zoo. I think I was one of the first interns allowed to do it. Worked with a few different people. Got really rounded, but the one animal that I never got to work with was the tiger or the big cats. Because there's certain rules for zoos pertaining to interns and dangerous animals. So I found the National Tiger Sanctuary in Branson, Missouri, who does have an internship. They're certified for that. And then I started driving 3 hours in the other direction to intern up there. So like Cheryl said, I'm kind of crazy. But I was willing to do whatever it took to get experience for it. And somewhere along the road, I realized I don't want to be a vet. I had already applied to vet school after this realization, pumped in $200 in application fees. And I was accepted. But during this time, I had met a special tiger that really changed everything. So that's kind of where this story starts. Is the tigers, I'm not discounting what the penguins have done for me, but this is what I do now. And what has led to my master's thesis about to be completed. So we'll go ahead and get started with this. Blurry picture, but it's the best I could do because it was taken with a phone camera. But this is Tina. Tina's known as what we refer to in the industry as an American tiger, in that she comes from the private world. So she was someone's pet in Texas. He would go in and groom her, play with her, and he had a grandchild that would sit outside the enclosure and read bedtime stories to her. So because of that, she's a really vocal animal. She grew up hearing people talk to her. Fortunately, Tina's mate, Ike, so Tina and Ike, Ike wasn't as interested in the grandchild as she was, and one day the gate was left open. So he didn't really maul her, but he saw her as a toy and played with her in her pool, as tigers do, and drowned her. So Tina and Ike then moved to a zoo in southern Texas, whose name I can't recall at this current time, but they take in a lot of tigers. Through that time, Ike passed away from natural causes, and now they had Tina, who hated all other tigers, and they didn't know what to do with her. So she came to us in Missouri. Funny enough, and I guess this is where our deep connection lies, she came there on the first day that I started. So we were both scared, it's both unknown place. She took it a little bit worse than I did, obviously. But within a week, she was that smiling tiger you see there. So she knew she was home. And before anybody points it out, yes, she is. She's a little cross-eyed. You may not be able to tell on the slideshow because of the contrast. She is cross-eyed, but I still think she's adorable, so she doesn't know any different. So from meeting Tina, and that cute little nose of her, I really became interested in tigers and their plight in the wild. What I learned at the Tiger Sanctuary is that Tina and most tigers in captivity, thousands of them actually, are the subspecies called Bengal. These guys live in India, mostly India, and they extend a little bit outside that country, but that's mainly where they live. Another tiger you're probably familiar with, which we don't have at the Memphis Zoo, but is the Amur tiger, otherwise known as the Siberian. So I grew up here in Siberian. Now it's called Amur because these guys only live along the Amur River in Russia now, which they used to extend all throughout Siberia. Name changes. Now one thing I want to point out as I go through here is take a look, and it may be hard because of the contrast. Take a look at their stripe patterns and their overall body shape. You can really see the extreme differences between these guys.
That's what I was trying to
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. The only awkward thing about this is this keyboard I have to carry around. So, here's the Amur tiger. Kind of hard to tell what he looks like. He has snow all over his face.
Oh, that's better. Yeah.
There we go, yeah. And then here's the Malaysian or Malayan tiger. Once again, not the subspecies we have here at the Memphis Zoo. But you can take a look at those stripe patterns and see how different they are. Any guesses to where this guy lives? It's kind of obvious. The Malayan Peninsula, right? Okay, so the names give it away. The scientific names, not so much, because obviously those are named after the people who discovered them. But the common names are easy to remember. Now this is one of my favorites. You guys have two of them here. The Sumatran tiger. They're one of my personal favorites just because I think they're so exotic looking in the face. Little ruffs. And once again, those stripe patterns so different. So what's different about these compared to those other tigers we looked at? Anybody catch on to it? I'll give it to you guys. So the stripes are a lot thicker here. They live in a denser forest environment. They have thicker stripes. That means they can blend in with the shadows better. Siberian tigers live in snow. Why do you need thick shadows? So they have less. The craziest looking tiger of them all, I think, is the Indo-Chinese. I haven't studied these guys much, but if you take a look, their face is almost a completely different shape compared to most others. Once again, stripe patterns a little little bit different than Siberian, but a little bit thinner than the Sumatran. The saddest subspecies to talk about out of them all is the South China. Most of you have probably never even heard of this, and that's because technically they are extinct. They're only found in zoos in the world, and I believe last time I checked there was 40 individuals in the entire world. The last wild one was ate by somebody. So that was the end of the wild tiger, the wild South China tiger. They're still found in zoos. The majority of them, believe it or not, are in South Africa on a reserve. So they shipped them out to get them away from that environment. Now, one thing I like to pause at before I get into too many details is this quote by World Wildlife Fund that says, "Who among us will look a tiger in the eye and say, 'We admired everything about you except your very existence'?" What shocked me when I was working with these tigers was this number, 2022. That's the year that scientists project the last wild tiger will walk our planet. 2022. Sometimes I tear up just thinking about it because I grew up as a kid hearing about this majestic wild tiger. If I ever have kids, they may not know what a wild tiger is. They may only exist in zoos, which is a great thing to have them in zoos, but when they're not in the wild, you kind of lose a part of that species. This number is what shocked me and took me out of the vet world and put me more in the zoo world. Yes?
Courtney, I read last year when I was studying tigers for some reason, that there's only about, in the entire world, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 left in the wild, all species of tigers.
Yes.
Left.
The best estimate I've seen in recent years was 3,200.
Okay.
But actually, part of that census, the Indian census, has been shown to be inaccurate, so it's actually a bit lower. They just don't know how low. In contrast to that, we have about 8,000 tigers in the United States. The majority of those are in private hands, not zoos, but private individuals. I mean, just take a look at how many tigers are here at Memphis and think of how many are at each big zoo. It just doesn't add up. The majority of them, we don't know where they are, which is kind of scary. But yeah, 3,200. We have more in captivity than we do in the wild. Some major threats. The obvious one you've probably heard about more than anything with a lot of species, is deforestation. Tigers face a problem with palm oil plantations. We find palm oil in chocolates, baked goods, which is unfortunate because I love Oreos just as much as the next guy. But it has palm oil in it. Palm oil is a very cheap production item. It's slightly better for you than certain things, but unfortunately to get it, they clear cut a forest and plant palm trees. And those trees are unsustainable. It's not like apple or orchards that can be reused. They harvest them, they clear cut them, and it's done. It's not something that is sustained. And to get to that point, they have to take the habitat of things like orangutans, tigers, all sorts of animals, not just the big cats. Another thing is prey depletion. So a lot of the species that tigers depend on for meals are also endangered, and they get poached just the same that tigers do. And on that topic, the global poaching crisis is very, very extreme. Most of those pictures are actually leopards, but there's a few tigers. And it's kind of neat that this just happened yesterday, but the CITES convention or IUCN conference is going on. You know, for years they've been saying that the trade of tigers in China hasn't been banned, and they had a person standing kind of where I am talking about the problem, and the Chinese delegate said, "Oh, well, we've never allowed the sale of tiger bones. We only allow the sale of tiger skins." And he went on to say captive tigers. So you know what happens to the bodies after that point? What happens to the meat, the bones, the eyes? Disgusting to think about, but every part of them is used. It caused quite an uproar at that conference. I was watching video from it, and you can just see the fury in people's eyes when that was admitted. But they say the first step to solving your problem is admitting one, so maybe we're getting there with it. This map really puts things into a really good perspective. So this light yellow that you see throughout here all the way up to Siberia, that's the tiger's historic range. What you see as the tan or brown is where they're found now. This has happened since the kind of early to mid-1900s. This is not something that's happened over thousands and thousands of years. This has happened since around the Industrial Revolution and onward. What's surprising is this yellow that's throughout here. Some people are like, what? I didn't know tigers lived up there. That's the tigers you saw in Roman gladiator fights. You hear about in historical accounts. It's the Caspian tiger, commonly used in that. Could have been its downfall too, but it's not been around in many people's lifetimes. The others, of course, are all the other subspecies I've talked about. The most outrageous one that I mentioned was the Siberian. You can see where the Amur River is now and why it's called that. It's only found on that little brown on the East Coast. I mainly put this in here. I know you guys care about endangered species, but when I give this talk to just general public members, there's always a question about why does it matter to me? I can still see them in a zoo. Why does it matter if they're gone from the wild? Well, that's because tigers act as a keystone species. Does anybody know what a keystone is in a building in construction?
Standing.
Keeps it standing, right? What would happen if you took that keystone out of a building? Bad, right? I mean, completely hazardous conditions. The same can be said about the tiger in an ecosystem. The tiger's the keystone, the ecosystem's the building. And with tigers, you have healthy prey populations because once again, you have carnivores or predators controlling them. And when prey's in check, you have a healthy plant basis. You don't have things just getting killed out like in Yellowstone, when some of the deer and elk basically killed off all the plant species in that area. And obviously, all this makes a healthy forest. Tigers are there, everything else is going to be healthy. We get so many products from the forest that it does get back to us in some way, especially when it comes to medicinal things. Most of the world's most famous medicines are found in nature, not something chemically induced in a lab. So who knows? I always like to point out, and many scientists say this too, that the cure for cancer could lie in a rainforest somehow, and we may not know it before it's gone. It's very scary to think about. Now, this is the other question that I get after I've told all this really scary stories, and that's, is it possible to bring endangered species back from the brink? I like to raise the point of whales. This is actually how I got into doing what I'm doing. So we were sitting at lunch at the Tiger Sanctuary, and I mentioned earlier that Tina is a very vocal cat. So we said, why don't we record Tina and make tiger song CDs like they did whale song CDs, and we can save tigers. And we all laughed because that's kind of hysterical to think about. People driving in the car, listening to tigers roaring, and you know, it's not the same as a whale song, but still. But wasn't really that bad of an idea because if you think about it, when people started listening to these whale song CDs in the 70s and 80s, people made that connection. These guys have families, they have friends, they have a language, and they related to them more. And of course, that's what spiked the big tourism industry with whales and got people caring about them. So, why not tigers? Why couldn't we use their roar or their chuff or their calls to save them? And how could we save them? What could we do with it? What kind of information is in that? Before we can really get into that, I just want to go over a few basics, and I'll go over some of this kind of quickly. The traditional roar that we think about when people mention a lion or a tiger roaring is actually an aggressive call. And it's more commonly in the scientific world called a coughing roar. It's different than a true roar, which we'll hear in a little bit. So the coughing roar is that one that you see on MGM film, or you hear when tigers are fighting. On the other hand, they actually have more social and happy vocalizations than they do angry. So they have something called Proustin. Don't have to worry about it right now. I'll play it here in a second for you guys. They have moaning, which sounds like a cow mooing more than anything, and the true roar, which is what my research is focused on. And the idea is that since these vocalizations are so vital to friendly relationships, what kind of information is in it? What are those tigers saying when they make those sounds? I'll just scroll over that. So what we have here, and I'm going to try and play it with this keyboard. I may have to fumble around a bit. And there's the mouse. So this first one, Proustin is the technical word for chuffing. Chuffing is a tiger's greeting form. It's how they say hello. Actually, the tigers I've worked with, if you go up to them and you make this sound at them, they will actually do it back. And before anybody asks, I'm not going to do it in front of all of you because I do a horrible chuff. Tigers don't judge me, but people usually do. So I'm not going to do it. You do get the occasional tiger that kind of gives you a funny look, and it's like, what are they trying to say? But this is a chuff. This tiger is named Bella, and she lives at Big Cat Rescue in Tampa, Florida. Oh, that is not Bella. Of course, it was working earlier when they were here, and now it's not going to work. Okay, let's try a different one. If it doesn't work, I'll let those who are interested listen at the end, because it's on my laptop, so we'll get to hear it. Trucking sounds more like a horse neighing than anything. Let's try this one. If this one doesn't work, then we'll just move on. Okay, that's kind of unfortunate, but we'll listen to it later on. Don't worry, you'll get your tiger fix here in a bit. What's amazing is actually not many studies have been done on friendly vocalizations on the big cats or even the little cats. And the majority of them are actually on just their friendly close range calls. Nothing is delved into the long distant calls that they make. So only friendly, and typically it's been in things like the lynx and bobcat, nothing much bigger than those. What's surprising though, and kind of interesting I think, is that one of the major studies was done with lions and their infanticidal behaviors where the male goes in and kills the other male's children before he breeds with the others. Female lions can actually recognize infanticidal males, so males that they know have done this before, they can recognize them just by their voices and know, hey, here comes the big bad boy that's going to kill everybody, and they can prepare without even seeing him. That's pretty neat, I think. Unfortunately, though, you can't really apply what lions do to tigers because they both have completely different social dynamics. One's a pride animal, one's solitary by nature. So we're wondering, lions have it because they have tight-knit family groups. Well, what about tigers? This is a very technical page. I'm just going to point out the little image over here just for the sake of time. They have some tigers up at the Minnesota Zoo. They knocked them out for a little bit, hooked up a brain monitor to them, and played back some tiger calls to them while they were knocked out, and they were looking at their brain waves. What they noticed is they are highly sensitive to these frequencies at the lower level. So right here is 0.5 kilohertz. What is on the side over here is how loud that call is they're playing to them. Look how low it is as soon as the brainwave's picked up listening to it. The higher calls, so 40 kilohertz or so frequency, they have to turn it up almost to 100% before they get a brainstem response from a tiger. So what's in that information? Why are they cued in to listen to that really, really low level? And the kind of idea is, if we had this information, if we knew, if you could track a tiger by its voice, with age, sex, any kind of information about that, it could actually be one of the most minimally disruptive forms of tracking them that we've seen for most forest animals. Especially with an animal that lives in really dense forests that you can't see very well on foot. Some have hypothesized that there's actually natural selection variables for unique vocalization. For example, these stump-tailed macaques, they have social ranks that they can understand just from calls alone. Another thing is bottlenose dolphins. If a calf wanders away from their mother, they've actually noticed that these mothers develop calls called signature whistles, and the baby knows it's its name and comes back to the family group. So obviously this serves some sort of selection factor. It keeps the family together, keeps the family happy, and the genetics can get passed on if that animal stays healthy. It's been seen plausible in other animals too. The spotted hyena, you can actually tell sex differences between their calls just by listening to them. And more importantly, and this is kind of a hard picture to look at, but these are elephants in Central Africa, studied by Cornell University. They have something called the Elephant Listening Project, where they can tell every individual from their call alone, and they can also recognize gunshots from poachers as they happen. Real-time monitoring. They know where that poacher was, and they can track him down. Another thing is this project is able to put all this technical information in the hands of locals. Locals can call up on a phone and say, how many male elephants have called today? Or has male 300 called today? The computer automatically tells them. A lot easier than looking at camera trap pictures or going out tracking them on foot. So our main objective with all of this was to see if there's individual variation in these tigers' calls, as well as if you can tell males and females apart. And the idea is to do something similar to what the Elephant Listening Project did. So can you make a vocal fingerprint for them? Does anybody know how you tell tigers apart already? Not vocalizations, but something we use already. Stripes, yeah. So this is Dee here at the National Tiger Sanctuary. All tigers have unique facial stripes as well as side stripes. Dee's facial markings, it's kind of hard to see, it's a blurry picture, but she has eyes underneath her eyes. She has a little circle with a little dot underneath both eyes. No other tiger is going to have that, not even her siblings. So stripe patterns. We're thinking we can take their vocalizations and do just that without even having to see the tiger. They could be far away, we can still know who it was. As I mentioned, they track them by camera traps, though the camera trap pictures don't always turn out. This one did, but I've seen pictures from my friends where it's the butt of a tiger, and what are you going to do with that? I mean, it's cute, but I mean, you can't tell who that is. You see a butt, or the camera flash is so bright. I mean, you can see how poor little thing got blinded when it looked into that. Or you happen to get them running off. You know, there's a picture of them carrying a deer in their mouth. You can't see their stripes. A lot of wasted time, and it's very labor intensive because you have to look at these pictures individually. As I know, there is no program that just flips through the pictures. I've seen some of my friends that work in Thailand lay out pictures on a table, and they're just like, well, that kind of looks like that tiger, that looks like that tiger. Very intensive. Another thing is tracking by paw prints. You can actually tell males and females by the width of the paw prints. So females are more petite, they have a narrow paw, and the males have thicker, wider paws. This is a male right here. Bad thing is, tigers, they vary. And they have actually tracked, used this as a basis to find man-killing tigers when they thought it's a male or female, and they blamed the wrong tiger for it. So it's not always accurate. It's good for what we have now, but it's not as accurate as it could be. So for our study, and that's Bengali, they all have names. So the scientists that are on my committee don't really like that. You know, they're like, oh, they need more technical numbers, but I have Bengali, Flavio, Tina, a lot of strange names. Bengali here lives in Florida. So we focused on the Bengal subspecies. After all, it's the most populated one. There's about 1,400 in the wild out of that 3,200. Also, there's a lot of them in captivity. And the idea is, even though this is a separate subspecies and all those others, most of these contributions anatomically are more at the species level. There really doesn't seem in literature to be much of a difference between subspecies, so we think it should be applicable to all of them. But I'm in the works at the Bronx Zoo to start recording different subspecies to see how true that is. So we're going to account for that in our study to see if Amirs are different from Bengals and so on. What we also did is we looked at just adults because we didn't want a whiny little baby tiger cub, as cute as that would be, in our study because his voice may be different than what it's going to be when he grows up, just like a human child. And also mature individuals, like I mentioned, they're hypothesized to have a more distinct. So just like a human teenager going through puberty, their voice may waver every once in a while. So we looked at just adults in the teen ages. Though, this always shocks people, we have one tiger in our study that was 24. And he's the oldest, one of the oldest tigers in the United States. So he is in the study. Unfortunately, he passed away from old age a few months after that. But his voice lives on in this study. So here's an example, just quickly looking at it, of our tiger makeup. I decided to go one step further than every other scientific paper. As you can probably see, I do that in a lot of things. One step further. Most studies look at just 4 tigers or so. I said 38. I'm going to look at 38 tigers just to make sure that there actually is a difference between these guys and I can actually tell them apart. Because if you have 3, it could just be chance. You have 38 and you see a difference, you're going to know something's there. So there's a picture of me and Tina with an old-fashioned microphone before I had my fancy recorders recording her. But we recorded them mainly at night, so roughly from dusk to dawn, from about 5 to 9-ish. We just set up a recorder and it's automatically set to turn on. You don't have to have a human come in. There's no humans around them, so no interference from them. Each tiger was recorded 6 nights total, broken into 2 different rounds. And all methods, we're proud of this, We have them approved by the UCA IU-Cook Committee to make sure that everything we're doing is not stressful to the animals and most humane. So we're approved for that too. What we looked at is a bunch of different variables, and I'll just scroll to this one because it's easier to look at this. What you're looking at is known as a spectrogram, so it's a visualization of a tiger's call. These are long calls or the true roaring. And all these dark forms are the exact frequencies which the vocal cords vibrate. So you're looking at a sound, or you're looking at vocal folds, a visual representation of the sounds they make, which I think is kind of neat. So we pulled vocal period duration. So once that tiger starts calling, when does it stop? How long does it go? We also looked at individual call duration. We looked at how long do they take breaths before they start calling again. We also looked at two sets of frequencies. The minimum, which is the farthest point on that first vibration out of the vocal folds, and the maximum, which is the highest point on that first vocal cord vibration. Anybody a stat person in here? Ah, one or two? Okay, so I'll try and be as simple as I can with this because it's even over my head. So I will try and explain it as best as I can. Basically, we just took something called an ANOVA, which is an analysis of variation, to see if there is variation and is it significant or is it just chance. We had to do separate ones just because how complicated we were with our data. There are ways in statistics to do everything at once. We couldn't do that at first, but we did do something that takes everything into account at the end. I have a fancy graph to show you that. So if you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, I'll show you. So I have a graph. It's hard to see on this screen just because it's a big graph. I know it's blurry. These are the names of the individual tigers, so each bar is a different tiger. That's all you really have to know for this. And what we found is there is a significant difference between those tigers. So significant that the chance of error was less than 0.00001. So amazing. I almost cried when I saw this. Cheryl probably saw my Facebook post because as soon as I did it, I was like, oh my gosh, you guys won't believe this. So there is a difference, and my sweet Tina girl, she has the highest voice out of all of them, so she stands out. She is the best, you know. Maybe I'm biased. So to further break this up, just to see where those differences are, we looked at females by themselves. Every bar that doesn't have a matching letter is unique. So Tina is different from everybody else because she only has the A letter. As you notice though, some of them, like Nikki for example, they share matching letters with quite a few of them. That's because some of these tigers, we only got like 2 or 3 good calls out of them. And Tina, on the other hand, had like 54. So we're hoping that in the future we could get more calls to sort this out more. But the trend is they are different. And they are statistically different. Males, on the other hand, not so different. There is a significant difference, but they share a lot more letters. And as you can see, all males except for TJ here, they're all lower than 100. They're all in about the same range, which struck me as kind of odd because if you look at the females, they're all over the place. Really high, kind of low, in between, variation all over the place. Males, on the other hand, are in the same range, so that's kind of funny, right? Kind of strange. We also looked at maximal frequencies. Same results here. I won't spend too much time on them. Once again, chance of error was 0.0001, so pretty good. Makes me happy, makes my advisor happy. We're all happy at the end of this. Same results here. Females, Tina's completely different from everybody, so she's a shining star. Tigger, also slightly different though. Tigger's about the same as Nick. So once again, if we had more calls to look at, we'd probably see more differences. We also looked at males. Once again, they're all pretty similar to each other, so that struck us as odd once more. And one of the most striking differences, which, I mean, they're just like humans if you think about it. Males have these deeper, lower frequency voices. Females have higher voices, clear-cut difference between the two. Once again, check out the chance of error here, 0.0002. Very, very low. It's considered good if you have a 5% chance of error. So we're even lower than that. Once again, females and males here for the other frequency. I won't talk about it too much. Once again, significance. And what we did is we took a look at that holistic model. So can we put everything together, and how accurately can we identify those individuals? What we see here on this scale is 0 to 100%. 100% meaning that you can accurately identify 100% of the individuals. Or actually, this is the sexes, sorry, I apologize. What we saw is that even with one variable, so just minimum fundamental frequency, over 90% chance we can identify if that tiger's male or female just from its call. The one that just kind of goes crazy here was vocal period duration. Males and females, that's kind of an iffy gray area. They both vary. So that's why it goes down this low. Each of these numbers represents increasing numbers of variables added together with a total of 7 at the end. And it's not listed on the side, but we got it up to 94% accuracy with all the variables added together. So what we thought about here is, why are there differences? And if you think about it, it's pretty simple. So they all start with one kind of neural signal which is sending out that vocalization. But depending on your genetics, even people in here, your vocal cords and your vocal tracts vary, right? You don't all sound the same. Same could be said for tigers. They've all had different growth developments. Those tigers I work with have come from different zoos, different private owners. And we all know just in the accredited zoo world, we all do different things. So could lead to different development. Once again, not all tigers are clones, right? They all have different genetics. So there's variation there. And when that signal or that vocalization passes through there, that track is going to amplify different parts of it and make that sound unique, just like mine compared against all of yours. We also notice that there's a big difference, as seen in this picture of two of my tigers, between males and females. Males are extremely large compared to females in some regards. Those two are Siberian, so that's why the male is gigantic in the picture. But what this is known as is sexual dimorphism. So the two sexes are different. Obviously that means weight-related differences. So we think that the primary reason for males and female vocalizations being different is weight-driven. So somehow weight plays into a factor. And maybe if we had finer details, we looked at more frequencies, we could actually pinpoint what a tiger's weight was from a vocalization. We're not going that crazy yet with it, so we're just trying to get the basics done. Another thing is higher calls are produced by smaller animals, traditionally. That's what all papers point to. We've seen that in our studies. And what's exciting is it all makes sense. If you're a forest-dwelling solitary animal, you want to be able to communicate long distance who you are, and if you're male or female, especially during mating season, right? If you're not even going to see an individual, you got to tell them somehow who you are. Another thing, and cute little picture for everybody. Not my picture, so I have never worked with cubs, unfortunately. But female tigers, they spend a lot of time together. Males, as soon as they reach maturity, they start branching out. These females, on the other hand, they don't want to go away from mom right away, just in humans. And so they slowly branch out. And even then, they have a little bit of territory overlapped with mama. So if they want to go visit, they can come visit. And as they get older, that space gets smaller and smaller to when they're separate. And then that one spends time with its cubs and the process starts all over again. But during that time, those females are communicating with each other. You want to know that that female you're talking to is actually your daughter, right? You don't want it to be some stranger female tiger that's going to come in and beat you up. So you don't want to spend unnecessary energy trying to defend your territory if you don't have to. So we think that's why there may be development between that. And also, why females are so unique as compared to males. We're almost to the end of this, so if anybody's not excited by tiger calls like I am, we're getting there. Males, on the other hand, we think they may only have to rely on sexual identity of an individual they're talking to. It's not necessarily as important to them to recognize individuals or to have an individual vocalization. In previous data, and this is what surprised me, Goodrich, he works with Panthera. He's one of my good friends. He's helped me with this study, forming it. Wild tigers, they have up to 5 different mates at a time. And they kind of just go to that person's territory, mate with her, and they go over to the other lady and mate with her. So they have a very exciting kind of a bachelor life. Don't have to be in the picture, and they just go mate with the female and they leave. Tigers are funny like that, right? And what some people have noticed is something called an honest indicator. What that means is females, first of all, in many mammal species like red deer, they prefer individuals with lower harmonics because that pinpoints to a larger individual. And what does it mean if you're a wild animal and you're a larger individual than all the others? What does that mean? Survival, right? So food, you probably have resource potential. So you have lots of access to prey if you're a tiger, and you can protect her if you have to. You also have good genetics, and that's in the animal world, that's what it boils down to. How good of a father, or how good of the genetics does that father have that's going to make my cubs survive longer? They don't, think about that, but instinctually they know that's what they need. So we believe that there's honest indicators in that, and that's why males are very similar to each other. Another thing is, these are zoo tigers. They're not wild tigers. So they're all the same weight, they're all taken care of, they're all fat and happy, as I say. So we think all of our male tigers may be similar because they don't vary as much as a wild male tiger. Unlike females, that have to be more individualized. And one of my friends did this fancy little logo for me. I think it's adorable. We have shirts with it on it, so it's cute. Looks like a Wi-Fi signal coming out of the tiger's nose, though, right? But this is just an overview of everything I've talked about. We think that all of these sources of variation are what causes these vocalization differences. All the way from age, it probably says fighting ability, so a larger individual. Also identity, possibly mating status. So these females, if you've paid attention to some of the tigers here, they probably talk a lot more when they go into estrus. They talk longer, more often. Unfortunately, we didn't have the data for our tigers, so we weren't able to do that analysis. But we think there could be information there. Resource holding potential kind of goes along with fighting ability. And we already saw that sex is a clear indicator in their vocalizations. Kind of in a conclusion, we believe this is a really good starting point with tracking these tigers in the wild. We recently got a grant from the Minnesota Zoo to buy more recorders. Woohoo, they're like $800 a piece, so we got 2 more. And we also got more batteries because you can't do your recorder without a battery. It's kind of funny writing a grant for batteries, but we got some fancy ones this time. And eventually what we're hoping to do, we're working on the permits now, but we're going to take this theory to the wild. See if it's possible to tell these individuals, or at least the sexes between each other. So we'll be going to India sometime soon to see if this is happening. The idea is make it easier for the rangers to keep an eye on these guys. Don't have to go out there as often. Eventually, you could also do something like the elephant study does and recognize when poachers are in the area just from a microphone. And once again, humans don't even have to be there. You don't have to invade their territory. You don't have to go out on the reserve. Less ranger deaths, less effort because you have to hike for miles. And you just set it out there and it streams to your computer. So that's what we're kind of getting to, and we have the foundation of it. Now, the most important question is, I get this from my advisor all the time. We're doing this in zoos. Can we actually do this in the wild? Because it's great to do it in zoos because it can lead to husbandry advances, of course. But is it possible in the wild? Now, I don't have sound on here, so it's less exciting. But I'll get out my laptop and play it here in a second. Well, what we did is my friends that work with Freeland Foundation, an organization that's dedicated to ending not only the wildlife trade, but also the human trafficking trade. So they're a unique organization that do both. They set up some camera traps, and they also turned on the recording function of it. And what this file is a male tiger walking straight up to the recorder and calling. Clear-cut vocalization, so it is there. I squealed and ran around the house when I got it. So, and that's just with a camera trap. Something that's not really meant to get crystal clear calls. So imagine what an acoustic recorder would do out there. So it is there. And I want to end on this note. It's one of my favorite quotes by Katie Payne. She was the one that started the Elephant Listening Project. And she said, "The wild world is a very noisy place, and the better we listen, the more we'll learn about it." And I believe that to be true. I've learned more about tigers in these past 2 years than I ever thought I could, just from their calls alone. So if we listen a little bit better, there's no telling what we'll learn from these guys. As always, I like to thank Minnesota Zoo giving me a grant. That's always good. You have to thank that. UCA, the university, funded a lot of this. Memphis Zoo is where I got my foundation, so I can't thank you guys enough. I mean, if I hadn't had that, I don't know where I would be now. And also the Tiger Sanctuary. Tigers, I mean, that's where I got introduced to tigers. They have been very helpful. They paid for my gas on those 3-hour trips every weekend, so I can't. The first day they told me they were going to pay for gas, I nearly cried because it was like the best thing ever, you know, whole tank to get up there and back. But yes, the Memphis Zoo, you guys are the most important factor that started all this, so thank you. I'll now take any questions, and while you're asking questions, I'll pull up those calls for you to hear. So, questions?
Thank you so much. Anyone have any questions
Yes.
while we're getting the calls?
The tigers in the study, were any of them with other tigers? They all individual?
Well, that's the funny thing, it varies. Some of them shared enclosures, and that's why we think some of these differences may not be as exact, because what if it's that other tiger that we're picking at?
Or they're just talking to each other,
Uh-huh.
whereas the wild would not be?
Yeah, exactly. It varies. The thing is, National Tiger Sanctuary has really big habitats, and they're kind of far apart, like acres. And so, Pride Rock, they're a bit more old school. They have smaller enclosures, and they're closer together, like, you know, I don't know how to explain it. But we think there may be differences between the two. That's why we're wanting to look at more zoos, like the Bronx Zoo, and then go to the wild and see. That's the only way we can do it. We don't know exactly why. Sorry.
In your study, Gina seemed to place real high. Could that possibly be because of her interaction from such a young age with humans?
I think it is because they recently, see, when you're a smaller sanctuary, you don't have all the fantastic things that some places do, and they just now got a scale to weigh your cat, so it was like Christmas, you know. And they weighed Tina, and she's the same weight as most of the other females. So I don't think it's weight related. I think it's because that little girl read bedtime stories to her. And what I did when I worked there, I'd get my coffee in the morning. You know, I'd get there driving from Arkansas 2 hours early anyway. I'd sit out there and drink coffee and talk to her just so she could have that interaction. So I think it's from that. Yeah. We can't go in with her obviously, but I still tried to give her some sort of, you know, interaction. Yes.
Was the name of the organization that you said was dedicated to ending human trafficking and
Free Land, so FRE Land Foundation. We're in Thailand. My good friend, he's actually from Canada, and he moved over to Bangkok to work there. So he trains the rangers and goes out in the field with them. It's kind of exciting. Any other questions?
I just want to say, I think it's fascinating, and it should be interesting to see where this goes. Right now, you're tigers, but you'll move into every other kind of animal.
Yeah, well, just to tell you guys, I don't want to get too excited. The Dallas Zoo called me on Wednesday for an interview as an outreach specialist, so thumbs up. Everybody call them and bombard them. Be like, "Hey, Courtney, do it. So,
Just follow up, there's some researchers now looking at insects. The theory is that each insect has a different frequency and different time signal duration. Otherwise, they cannot detect each other. So the idea is that some are low, some are high, some long duration, some short duration. It's all different.
and I didn't get into this very much, and I could talk for hours if you guys can't tell about this. But one thing I didn't mention is you can track more than tigers with this recorder. Camera traps are limited just to mammals that are crossing across. Birds fly too fast. It's kind of going along the lines of what he mentioned. If you have recorded, you could do something known as soundscape monitoring. You could monitor every animal that's out there. One system, all of them. I'm not the only one looking at that kind of potential, but that's what we're talking about in terms of this. I'm not saying I'm going to save every endangered species, but my research, someone could read my paper and build off of it, and it just kind of goes from there. So I do have these vocalizations here. Hopefully they are loud enough. I'll turn it up all the way and face it to you guys. If you can't hear it, you're more than welcome to come up here and hear it. This is chuffing, that horse name, and a mourning dove in the background. Oh yeah, now that's big time. Yeah, I'm not sure how to make it louder. Yeah, now it's moving. They also have this moaning call that she was doing at the end. That sound, that's talking. That's Bengali. He was mad I wasn't talking back and I was just walking around recording him. And then this is the research the call that my research is done on. And it was kind of weird for me to go over that without ever hearing what it sounds like. This is it. It's really deep, quiet, but it's like, oh, like that. It can be heard up to 3 miles away. So that's what we looked at. I know it's weird to kind of backtrack now, but that's why we think there's so much information to it. The crickets. And one last one, for those excited about that Thailand call. What I think is so interesting is actually you can hear some monkeys and stuff in the background. I've never recorded in the wild, so it's exciting. Wild tigers. You hear the stuff around. Let's check it. Yeah. So, it's there. Listening to that bird in the background, the primate called out at the beginning, I don't know what it is, but there's so much information in just one audio file. I don't know what's in it. I'm not an insect person, but I'm not scared of them, but I'm sure someone would be interested in some of that data. Okay, any other questions? I know you probably didn't hear it as good, but we do have the Facebook page. If anybody wants to listen to the calls, I'm the only one that mans the Facebook page, so sometimes like it's been a month since I've posted it. But if you just search